Där borde du ha fått det.
Yes.
Okay, so we're live. So I'm Daniel, and with me today I have Mattias Persson. And who are you, Mattias?
Well, I'm a developer.
Nice.
I'm a freelancing consultant
Okay.
who works mainly with a company called Polestar.
Okay.
They make electric cars.
Nice.
And I'm part of their digital side, building order management systems and stuff like that.
So I guess they do a bit of testing, right?
They do. They do.
Nice. So how would you say like a normal day in your work when you're doing some testing? So how does it? What do you do during that day?
So the way I normally work when I program nowadays is that I follow a technique called test-driven development, which I've found to be very, very useful, where I basically start off writing my tests.
Nice.
And what I usually do is I start off by just defining the tests, kind of like a spec for the feature I'm building. So I know in short terms how it will work, what the requirements are, and then I just fill out the tests first.
Okay.
And try to build a feature along the way.
Mm-hmm. So what programming language is this? What kind of test framework are you using? Yeah,
so I pretty much exclusively work in PHP.
Okay.
And use a testing framework called PHPUnit.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much the tools I use for testing.
Okay.
I use a framework called Laravel, where PHPUnit is built in and prepared. Okay. So yeah, it's not a lot of tooling around it.
So you said something that you had a requirement and then you made a sort of executing specification. Was that it? By writing tests for this requirement, right?
Yeah, so I pretty much start by just writing short lines of like, this is supposed to happen, this is supposed to happen when this happens, stuff like that.
And you write that as test code, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I write that as test cases. So I start off building one test case for each sort of each requirement or each scenario that I can think of, without going into any technical details. Just specifying exactly how I want the feature to work. And I find that to be it's easier to get a good overview of what I'm actually building. So yeah. I know when I start building the feature, I have a spec of all of the requirements, and then I can just fill out those tests. And when I'm done filling out all the tests and they are all green, then I know that I've covered all of the requirements, basically.
So when you say fill out the test, you're actually writing code, system code, so to speak.
Yeah, so exactly. So usually I start off by specifying all of the tests, empty tests, just lines of saying how it will work. Then I start from the top, fill out the test, build the feature so it works with that test. Okay. Then I go to the next test case and fill out that one, and so on.
So is this the norm at the company at Polestar?
Hard to say, actually. There's a big variety of tech stacks and techniques that are being used, and there's a lot of developers. I think it's kind of a personal preference thing also. Different people enjoy different ways of testing, I guess. So this is just what I've kind of found to be the best way for me, I guess.
Okay, nice. So what do you think is the the great benefit of having these tests before you start working on the system code?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of benefits that I can think of. One that I didn't really consider at first when I started learning this technique is that it really helps me to have this specification of the feature sort of done for me when I start actually building the feature. So when I'm halfway done with the feature, I won't forget some requirement or some scenario that I thought of in the beginning, but then forgot while I was building. I know I have all of the test cases there, and it's kind of like a framework for the feature. So that's really good. It really helps you to not have to think about how the feature will work while you're also thinking about how you will build the code. You can just focus on building the code.
Nice.
Another really good thing is that once you have the feature done and all of these test cases are green, you are free to refactor the code freely. As long as the tests still pass, then you're pretty much good to go. So yeah, it really takes away a lot of the insecurity that I had before, I think, especially when I'm building large features. So
would you say that this is an easy technique to learn and use, or was it easy for you, so to say? It's hard to say about other people, but for you, yeah. was it easy, or was it hard?
I think that the technique in itself is, I mean, I think you sort of probably have to get over a certain threshold, and then it sort of just feels natural. For me, I kind of feel uncomfortable not doing it that way now. But I mean, of course, it takes some time getting used to it. I know at first it really felt like I was doing double the work, because I'm basically writing double the code. But I think the most difficult parts are the really technical aspects of it. So, and that's more in general with testing, I think.
Okay. So you mean like the framework thing of the test framework, the PHPUnit framework, or is that the technical thing, or is it other thing, how to test things? Is that
yeah, I think more how to test things, like the concept. Of course, I'm sure there are technical challenges to get used to in every language, but sure, the concept I think takes some time really getting used to and refining. It's a bit of a different way of thinking, I think. But yeah, I found it to be, once you really learn it, I find that it sort of takes a lot of load off of your shoulders and your head.
Yeah, nice. So are you a mockist, or whatever it's called when you mock a lot, or do you prefer to test just from the outside, just the public methods and
well, I mock some things for sure. I think it's difficult not to mock at all, especially when you're working on a big project. One thing that I learned a few years ago was something that's really useful. I found it's a good rule of thumb, saying that you should never mock what you don't own.
Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, so at first I was really trying to learn this mocking thing before I really understood it, and I tried mocking all sorts of things, third-party services and libraries and stuff like that. And then I realized that some of them actually changed their code, but my mock wasn't in line with that. So
oh, that is interesting. Yeah. So
yeah, so so I was mocking them, but my mocks were invalid, which basically meant that I was testing non-existent code.
okay, okay, nice. Never thought of that one. Okay, so we previously, just before this interview, you and I talked about testing different things.
Yeah.
So would you care to elaborate on testing different things and what you meant with that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that one thing that I was really striving for while learning the testing in general was that I really felt like I really needed to have 100% test coverage, and I really needed to test every line of code and every method and yeah, everything. And that is something that I feel I've really become more comfortable with during the years. That's not always the best way to go. There are, like you said, there are different ways of testing things. You have unit tests, feature tests, acceptance tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests. Yeah, there's a lot of terminology, and these different test technologies can be useful for different things. So in the beginning, I think I would write first of all, I would write a unit test for every method. Then I would write a feature test, maybe testing that the methods actually work together. And then maybe I would write an end-to-end test, testing the actual user interface. And nowadays I would probably just write the end-to-end tests.
Yeah. So you test the entire all the other things through the end-to-end test. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you'd have to take the context into account, but for the most part, I think you can really, with experience, I found that it's not always valuable to test everything. You can come a long way just end-to-end testing, seeing that the actual flow works as expected, and then you have one test instead of 30.
Yeah. So would you say that end-to-end tests are also like easier to change when some requirement changes? I mean, you need to change those than having 100 unit tests for every function and every method and every class.
Yeah. I think for the most part, yes. The unit tests, since they are so isolated, changing a requirement often requires changing a lot of small unit tests, which can feel to me kind of confusing. In a large code base, I am always a bit uncomfortable changing a test that is already green. If you have an end-to-end test, then you know that you're actually changing the requirement or the expected flow. You're not changing details of the implementation because that's usually irrelevant. You just want it to work as the requirement specifies. So yeah, I think that's oftentimes a lot easier to change.
Nice. So if you would give like 1 or 2 advices to my students, what should they focus on? What should they think of? What should they prepare for during their studies or in testing or in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the things that motivate you are usually good things to focus on. If you're sort of pulled into one direction automatically, then you should probably pursue that. I found that to be the way for me. When I started programming, PHP was a pretty controversial language. A lot of people really didn't like it, and yeah, I often felt that I should probably learn more languages or different languages, but it always felt the most the funniest language for me to work with, and yeah, it's been pretty good since then. So
nice.
Yeah.
So nice. So go with the flow and have fun while you're learning. Is that a translation of what you just said?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, I would say.
So then I say thank you to Mattias, and thanks, and
thank you very much.